He is the last of the ninjas, the sole custodian of hundreds of years of tradition. But this 70-year-old is watching Japanese tradition slowly die. Masaaki Hatsumi is an expert in the art of assassination. At his training school, students come to learn the 36 deadly techniques. But the vast bulk of Hatsumi's students are foreigners. The ninja master says interest in ninjutsu has all but dried up for Japanese. And Hatsumi has a prophecy. Nothing could be more traditional than the art of sumo wrestling. But it's in trouble on the ropes. And just as a ninja master prophesies, its people are dying. But in sumo's case, just how and why they die is a peculiarly Japanese mystery. This is a sumo stable, a house where wrestlers live and train in Spartan conditions. The stables are the last outposts of feudalism in Japan. Junior wrestlers perform menial tasks for their seniors, and ancient Japanese hierarchy is strictly observed. Japan's highest-ranked sumo wrestler is this man, Akebono. Traditionalists are appalled by his success, not because Akebono isn't good, but because he isn't Japanese. Japan's best-known wrestler is American, born and raised in Hawaii. For Akebono, succeeding at the sport was relatively easy, compared with understanding its time-honoured complexities.
The Japanese have a hard time understanding this. So for somebody being out of Japan and coming in, I've been here 13 years and I still cannot understand it.
The origins of the arcane and secretive sumo society go back more than 2,000 years. It was always much more than sport or entertainment. Part ritual, part religion, sumo was closely associated with Shinto. It was said to embody Japan's national spirit and its emphasis on hierarchy, respect and tradition. But for the modern young Japanese warrior, there are more worldly and more Western interests. Sumo is being pushed aside. Tournaments like this one are rare these days. The number of school children wrestling is down more than 1/3 on 10 years ago. There are 100 times as many children playing soccer and baseball as there are wrestling.
子供にとってその、判断基準っていうのはかっこいいかかっこよくないかと、そういったことじゃないかと思いますんでね、やっぱり、ユニフォームと回しどっちがいいかといえばやっぱりユニフォームの方がかっこいいんじゃないかと思いますし、やっぱり、限られたのスポーツになってしまうんじゃないかという気がします。はい。
Throughout Japanese society, the lure of the loincloth is losing its appeal. These students at the Tokyo University Sumo Club are finding it increasingly difficult to attract new members. For the first time, seats are going unsold at sumo tournaments and TV ratings are slipping. More disturbing, there are accusations that sumo has been contaminated with Western values like corruption, and that this centuries-old ritual is nothing but a performance, with no more integrity than World Championship Wrestling.
世界のスポーツでこれだけに表情があるスポーツは多分ないです。昔ですよ。
For the first time in sumo history, the code of silence among participants is being broken. Former wrestler, now persona non grata, this man, Itai, is at the centre of the scandal.
考えられないですよ。やはりスポーツ選手は八百長は絶対にしちゃダメだと思います。広島小倉に止まります。
The first suggestion there was something rotten in the sumo world surfaced in Nagoya, an industrial town 2 hours by bullet train south of Tokyo. This modern Japan is a world apart from the one in which these people's ancestors first drew circles in the village earth and wrestled. In 1996, this man's father, Seiichiro Hashimoto, a former sumo wrestler, and a stable master called Naruto, stunned the sumo establishment with a series of sensational allegations. They claimed sumo had close links to the Yakuza, the Japanese mafia, and accused wrestlers of regularly fixing matches for money, taking drugs, holding orgies, and dodging their taxes. The two men promised to reveal more in a book and agreed to address the foreign media at the Tokyo Press Club.
うちの親父がお金を出して八百長で横綱にしたっていうことを多分言おうと思ってたと思うんですよ。
But Hashimoto's father never got to speak at the press club.
この相撲の告発をして何か普通の病気じゃなくして死んでいったっていうことは何かあったんじゃないかなっていう疑惑の目は僕は今も持ってますけど。
When Hashimoto fell ill, he was brought here, to this hospital outside Nagoya. The next day, his friend Naruto came to visit, and suddenly he too got sick. Both men died within a few hours of each other. The doctor said the cause of their deaths was a mystery disease. Remarkably, there was no autopsy and no police investigation. A story like the death of two high-profile whistleblowers would have received front-page coverage in the West. But in the cosy world of sumo, the issue received no attention in the mainstream Japanese media.
You would think that one of the Japanese weeklies at least would check into it and really start questioning, but never happened.
After watching and writing about sumo for 40 years, Andy Adams is not really surprised.
I think it's part of the Japanese character that these things go on, and the Japanese feel it was better not to pursue it and ask questions about it and just ignore it. And this happens a lot in Japan, but this is part of the Japanese character.
One reason an investigation never happened is that few in Japan are prepared to challenge the authority of the Sumo Association, a mysterious and well-connected body that controls every aspect of the sport. we made repeated requests for an interview with the association. But getting a straight answer proved harder than toppling a sumo wrestler. Inside this stadium is one of the year's major sumo tournaments, but this is the closest we were allowed to get, outside, and we were quickly moved on. Even filming lower-ranked sumos on the street requires the permission of the all-powerful association.
It's all-powerful because it's made up of ex-sumo wrestlers themselves. And there's no outside interference. It's only the ex-wrestlers.
But the bigger they are, the harder they fall. And now, for perhaps the first time in its history, the Sumo Association has been pushed onto the back foot. It's been dealt another body blow by one of its own. A former wrestler, Itai, who has gone public admitting he rigged sumo bouts and claiming the vast majority of sumo matches are fixed.
星を買うことによって要するに自分の心の安心それとその地位を守りたいんですよ。
The latest allegations forced the Sumo Association to defend itself.
痛い氏の発言を裏付ける証拠は何一つなく18名の力士も八百長ということを強く否定しております。
We wanted to track Itai down to question him, but after making his allegations, Mr. Itai disappeared. In Tokyo, it's not hard to lose yourself in the crowd. Itai was well aware of what fate can befall whistleblowers. His former stable master was a Naruto, one of the men allegedly murdered in Nagoya. Since retiring from wrestling, Itai has run a restaurant. We went there, but were served up a story that he had gone on a fishing trip in the country, indefinitely. After weeks of phone calls, we received word through an intermediary that Mr. Itai would talk to us on condition that the story was never broadcast in Japan. An interview was arranged on the outskirts of Tokyo.
誰かがねやっぱ自分を犠牲にしてでも真実を言うのが正しいんじゃないかなとかそういうの思ったんですけどね。
Itai repeated and elaborated on his claims, telling us that up to 80% of professional sumo bouts were rigged, with wrestlers paying their opponents up to 700,000 yen or $6,500 US to take a fall.
もうその当時は今でもそうだけど結局もうそういう伝統だったから別にそんななんていうか To
back up his claims of conspiracy, Itai produced an audio recording of a high-ranking official, which, he says, proves the Sumo Association itself was aware of the bout rigging. Itai went on to name names, giving us a list of sumos who he said had fixed bouts with him. The list contained some of the biggest wrestlers in sumo, including the sport's superstar, Akebono.
All I have to say on the subject is, like you've seen today, we come out, we work hard every day. It's unthinkable. I never seen anybody do it or heard of anybody doing it. But like outside in the world today, every time there's something good going on, there's always somebody trying to bring it down.
The fact that we were asking questions the sumo world wasn't used to being asked did not go unnoticed. Suddenly, after numerous faxes and dozens of phone calls, the Sumo Association granted us an interview with the man who controls every aspect of the sumo empire.
ただ勝ち負けを争うんじゃなくて、やはり社会の範となってですね、自分たちが生活をしなければいけないということでいるわけですから。
The chairman insisted on the moral virtue of the sumo world, and once again denied any match fixing.
名指しされたね、数名のれば遺体がね話をしたものに私が直接聞くなりそういうことをしてるわけですよ。で全てのものがねそれは否定してるわけだから、だから遺体の言ってることは全くね根拠のないことだというふうに言わざるを得ないですよ。
But some say the dark side of sumo is not new, that indeed it is rooted in the very history of the sport.
ヤクザとの関わりは相撲は非常に根が深いものがあります。
Ichiro Nita is a professor of history at Tokyo University.
実際のところそのヤクザと呼ばれている人々はその江戸時代ですからそうですね18世紀19世紀以降その相撲に限らずさまざまなその興行ものエンターテインメントの興行に関わって、
Professor Nita claims that sumo's links with the Japanese mafia remain.
おそらく完全に切れたとは言えないのが現状であろうと思われます。
No one is more convinced of that relationship than Kiyonari Hashimoto. The latest allegations simply confirm what he has suspected all along, that his father was murdered.
やはり相撲協会の方がやっぱ国技ですからまあ変な話こう日本のこの政治家ともつながりあるでしょうから、まあ、その動かすっていう力はあると思うんですよ。だから人一人2人ぐらいの、殺そうと思えば殺せるんじゃないかなっていうのは感じましたけどね。
It is unlikely that the truth of any of these matters will be known. The press is disinterested, the public doesn't really care. While some traditions may be under threat, one is alive and thriving. The Japanese code of silence.